Welcome inside another episode of Point to the Passer. We've got a lot to cover in the next hour together, so we're going to jump right in and try to keep this one tight. A nice four-game win streak recently for Carolina has our hopes up, but you know what they say, Jonathan? It's the hope that kills you. Jokes aside, it's nice to see this team trending in the right direction, just in the nick of time, or so we hope. So we're going to break all that down and so much more tonight. I know you may not be the most rested right now. We've been kind of chatting back and forth throughout the day, but appreciate you showing up tonight and hopping on to record.
Yeah, man, it's great to see you, Craig. Great to be back on with you. Excited to talk Carolina basketball. There's, like you said, a lot has happened since we were previewing the first Duke Carolina game at Cameron. Uh, Definitely some ups more recently. Certainly some big time downs. So we're ready to unpack all of it, along with the direction of the program. A lot of news related to that coming out here even today when we're recording as well.
Yeah, for sure. The last four games have been the high of the season so far. Our second four-game win streak of the season, second in ACC play. The previous was the stretch from Notre Dame through Cal, I believe, January 4th through about the middle of the month. So it's nice to have that back. I would say, like I said in the open, just in the nick of time. But we're going to break it down, starting kind of just looking back at this four-game stretch, starting with Syracuse. Just some points here. The three-point shooting has really propelled us in these four games. The most threes that we made all season, actually, at Syracuse. We were looking at 13 of 28 that game. But it's not only that, it's the bench play that has really stood out to us. I think we had, six or seven different players in double digits the other night against FSU. So, what's been your general takeaway and what has changed for this team in the last four games?
I mean, a huge piece of it's not the only thing, but a huge piece of it is that you have the old man Jalen Withers in his sixth year of college basketball, who, as he put it in talking to Adam Lucas after one of these recent games about what had changed, he said that he woke up and he also had been taking to heart something that Hubert says to them a lot, which is whatever it takes. And one of the managers pointed out, if you look at the initials of whatever it takes, that spells out wit. And so
Solid.
he's been embracing that mentality of whatever
Good.
it takes. And you see him just, I think, showing up with a different energy. It does seem like him being in the starting lineup allows him to get into a little bit more of a rhythm. And he's this is an understatement. He's playing free. He
Yep.
he is
Looks
not
loose.
playing with a conscience right now, which is both good and can be bad at times. Where he occasionally still will take some ill-advised shots, but he's hitting a lot of tough three-pointers. So that's a huge piece of it is, as we've seen with Hubert's offenses over the last 4 years, when he has a four that can space the floor a little bit, along with somebody who at the four position who can rebound and support the front court in that way, that makes a huge difference. And so Jalen really broke out in that Syracuse game. I think I want to say that was his career high. And if not, maybe it was an NC State game. I can't remember. They're all blurring together, but he's been on fire from three.
Mhm.
He's been hitting the boards in a way that he really hasn't done since the beginning of the season against Elon in that Kansas game. And that's the Jalen Withers that we need. He is a bit of a roller coaster in terms of a player. So you just have to ride it out with him. But I appreciate that he goes hard when he's in there. And right now he's riding a hot streak, and I hope it just continues all the way through the postseason.
Yeah, I'm super happy for him. It's always just nice to see a player kind of step into a role where they were expected to thrive and maybe things hadn't quite worked out. But he seems real comfortable and the most relaxed that I would say he's been since he's been at Carolina, which is good because he's going to be an essential part if this team is going to make a run to the tournament, make a nice little ACC run. He's gonna need to step up, and a lot of these bench guys are going to need to step up. I was pulling some stats earlier today, particularly in terms of bench points. And so we mentioned kind of off the top of the show, 34 bench points during the Syracuse game, 43 at the state game, 26 in Virginia, and 38 at FSU. That's three of our top four bench performances of the year have come in these last four games. You've seen different starting lineups, a little bit of variety, but the point here is that every single player seems to be kind of molding into the player they want to be this year in little bits and pieces. Not everybody's fully there yet, but this team is kind of meshing in their own way. And by being individually better, they're playing as a team better. They're playing again, like you mentioned, more loose. What's the next step for this team? What do you see that they have to do in these next three games? I want to keep kind of talking about the most recent four, but we've got Miami, Virginia Tech, Miami, who, as we're recording, is getting whooped by Duke. no surprise, still dead last in the ACC. But we've got the Miami game, Virginia Tech, and then at Duke. What do we need to see in these next two to build up to that Duke game to, like I said, it's the hope that kills you, but potentially knock them off in Chapel Hill?
I think really continuing to build the momentum that they have and how they've done it, which a couple of things are a little bit different. And I give Hubert and the team, really the whole staff as well as the team, a lot of credit that it really seemed like they could, and I honestly thought they were packing it in after that Clemson game. I mean, they
Sure.
got absolutely blown out by
You
Duke,
know,
obviously.
I didn't even watch that game. I was traveling with my folks out in Yosemite. We checked the score around 10 minutes in, didn't even bother pulling up the stream. Just let me enjoy nature, something positive. That's that. But I haven't even gone back to rewatch it. I've been told I shouldn't.
I would not. I would not go back unless you just want to experience pain
I'm
for
good.
40
I'm
minutes of
good.
basketball time. The thing is, the first 10 minutes of that game, we brought intensity. We brought effort. Defensively, uh, we're pretty solid overall. And then one of the issues this year has been when things start to go downhill, especially on the defensive end, it really starts to spiral. It impacts our
Hmm.
offense and vice versa. And teams go on big runs quick, whether that's
Yeah.
a lead evaporating. We've had so many, it feels like 8 to 10 point leads or a little bit more in conference play that evaporated almost immediately. And in this case, Clemson just they were able to go into Victor Lock-in time and time again in that first half. I think he had 20 points in the first half.
Yeah.
Um, and so from that 10-minute mark where it was an even game to all of a sudden Clemson is blowing us out, and we just packed it in after that. Pretty similar to the way the Duke game had started earlier. It started from the jump. All that to say, I really thought that was a tipping point going into Syracuse that I was really concerned that if things started to go south, that we were just going to fold and that was going to be the
Hmm.
season. I mean, we see teams like Miami who has talent on that team. There are some five-star guys on that roster. And like you said, they only have 6 wins. That's fewer wins than the worst Carolina team ever, which was really bad in
Hmm.
2002, 8-20. So I'll say this could have spiraled in a bad direction, but credit to Hubert, credit to the team, especially to right the ship here. And yes, another factor is the teams they're playing are not very good. Syracuse is not great. State is objectively terrible. And I'm not saying that just as a bias, my bias is a UNC fan, and I kind of enjoy when State's down. Not kind of, I really
We
enjoy
do.
it.
Yeah.
Um, but I looked at I looked at it was either KenPom or the net rankings, and you would expect Alabama and Auburn to be ranked ahead of State. They're two of the top 4 or 5 teams in the country. We know that from playing them this year. But the whole state of Alabama, Craig, is ranked ahead of NC State. That
You
includes
would
North
check that.
Alabama, South Alabama, University of Alabama, Birmingham. Any school in Alabama is ranked ahead of NC State. They are just not very good. They're back there in terms of the rankings, and they showed it when they came and played us. I mean, they had one of those nights that they've had in the Smith Center quite a bit over the years,
Hmm.
where they didn't have it at the beginning. And credit to this team who hasn't really done this. They just kept the foot on the gas in that first half, and it was over by halftime.
Yeah.
Um, so I think just building on that confidence, because to me that's the biggest key. There have been some scheme adjustments, which are all positive things. Definitely want to continue that. The lineup changes, like you mentioned, Withers playing well and starting is important. Drake moving into the starting lineup in place of Seth has really made a big difference, just because he just is so unique in his length and athleticism. Now he's playing his natural position, and you see what he can do on the perimeter. Some of those drives to the rim, the dunk against Virginia, where he
Hmm.
just is explosive and can get all the way to the rim and finish with authority. So those changes are important, but to me, ultimately, it's the confidence, it's the playing free, it's the playing with more joy, and it's showing that fight. And that seems to be the biggest change, because whether it's Jalen Withers, whether it's even Cade Tyson in this last game against Florida State,
Yeah.
Jalen Washington hit a top of the key three. You're seeing some of these things that we thought these guys were going to bring earlier in the season, which as a fan is both really frustrating because where has this been on the one hand? But on the other hand, happy for these guys. It's been part of their process for whatever reason. This team has felt, I think, a mental weight in terms of just the pressure and the tightness they played with for a lot of the year. And they're not playing that way now. So I hope they can continue that. I hope Hubert can encourage that and and coach a little bit looser too, because he can tighten up as well. So that's what I'd like to see going forward into this game against Miami, that this should be a woodshed game. You don't give them any
Has to
hope
be.
at all.
Yeah.
You from the beginning make sure that they know that you're the better team, and you leave no doubt by halftime, if not the first 10 minutes of that game. Virginia Tech on the road, Castle Coliseum is always a tricky place for us to go. They're not very good, but we've had some very close games with teams that are not very good,
Hmm.
and even some cases have lost close games to those teams. So you got to be ready. And then that last game, I guess we can get to that later on, but I have a lot of thoughts about the Blue Devils coming to Chapel Hill.
For sure. Yeah, this team's going to improve a lot in the next two games. Again, we're talking pretty low or mediocre ACC play in these last few games. Virginia Tech 10th in the ACC right now, Miami dead last. But it's less so about the other teams right now. It's more so about our intensity. And what you're seeing is that scoring distribution. For so long, I called us RJ in the heels last year and had that at a little bit in the beginning of the year too in Maui when RJ scored 30 and we beat Dayton by 1-2 and I won $110 on a $1 bet. Might have put one of those down the other night as well. Didn't hit, but stuff like that's now changed. We had Ian in the heels for a little bit. Ian was really stepping up when RJ was struggling, and it wasn't really anybody else. The fact that we're getting so many double-digit scores coming off the bench, getting guys rotating in, that's going to be key. So many top teams nowadays have the versatility and variety of players that can step up. They have a guy down low. You look at Vin Allen Lubin. We were high on him coming in as a transfer. He struggled. It's a little unexpected that Vin Allen Lubin and Jalen Washington have struggled as much as they have to get points down low. It just has taken a lot of time. Vin Allen Lubin looks very, very comfortable these last couple games. He's getting those assists. He's getting, hands on the ball, no dribble, just going up. He's getting some alley-oops from Elliott as well, which has been really great. So the fact that he's kind of established a presence down low is going to be essential for this team moving forward as well. And him and Jalen on rotating in and out, I think is a really good thing for this team going forward. Elliott's kind of a question mark right now. Unfortunately, I think for a lot of fans, it's just kind of disappointing to see that he hasn't progressed as we expected he would. There are a lot of factors in that. I feel for him. They were just disrespecting him the other night as open as they were leaving him. It was nice to see him hit two threes in the second half, but I think at one point they were backing off about 10 feet and just saying, yeah, go ahead and shoot it because we have full faith that it's going to be a brick and we'll get the rebound. And that's tough. I think it's a head game for him at this point. The turnovers have been an issue, but RJ, being the fifth year leader, has really stepped up and started putting some assist numbers up too. And so, again, it seems like you do have multiple players on this team who are finding their role and really stepping up when they need to.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The role definition piece, because it's been an ongoing journey to figure out those different roles. It's still ongoing to some degree because you got to continue to find the consistency with it. But that's been part of the challenge, and that's been part of Hubert tinkering with lineups and rotations for the length of time that he has. But yeah, really good point. I think RJ, the more that he can embrace that facilitator role, not that he's not going to be one of our top scorers or priorities on offense in terms of putting the ball in the hoop, but I think against Florida State he had 5 assists. I want to say no turnovers, which that's the type of game that you want from him.
Yeah.
And then a very efficient game, 5 of 9. Check me on that, but I think he was 5 of 9 from the field and 20 points, and playing with that ease and confidence and swagger that we saw so much from him last year. The one play that really stood out, was all over social media, was I can't remember the name of the Florida State player, but you know what I'm talking about, where he was clapping at RJ on defense.
Yeah.
Uh, I think it was a switch. I want to say he was like a 4, bigger player.
Yeah.
Um,
Wrong guy
I
to
don't
clap at.
know. I don't know what he was thinking, because I'm pretty sure RJ doesn't know his name, but he should have known RJ's name and should have understood the situation that he was getting
He
himself
does.
into.
That's why he was doing it.
Because that was one of the easiest crossover moves into a step back three that I've seen RJ take. It was awesome to see him do that. So the efficiency for him is a bonus, honestly, because it just hasn't been an efficient season, and we've been figuring out ways, even on days where he's been, I think in this stretch, one of those games, he was like 6 for 18. just too many shots. Ian needs more shots in that situation because Ian overall has been more efficient. But that's something was really good to see. I think his efficiency and that piece of it. I don't know that this is related, but I'm just thinking about like other things that I see are different. The three-point shooting is a glaring difference, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we have gone from being one of the worst teams in Carolina basketball history
Yep.
in terms of three-point shooting percentage to being on an absolute tear over this last stretch.
Yep.
And I think the encouraging part is it, like you're saying, it's not one guy. It's not Ian or RJ alone. It's been Withers has been huge. Drake will throw in a couple here and there. Seth was 2 for 5 the other night and had what felt like more closer to the Seth Memphis game or Dayton game earlier in the year. Uh, so the fact that, like you said, the distribution I think is really encouraging.
Yep.
And the assist numbers going up along with that, that it's not just Elliott that you're relying on for assists, but RJ and even now Drake facilitating. That guy has incredible vision. That
Yep.
one play on the fast break where somehow he even surprised Corey Alexander, who apparently doesn't get surprised when it comes to basketball plays. As he said, he can always see it coming, except in this case. But a wrap around on the break to Washington for the finish
Hmm.
was exceptional. So um, I think I've drifted from your question, but those are just a few other things that to me stand out. The
Yeah.
three point shooting, the rebounding, the teams we're playing, granted, are not great rebounding teams in state and Virginia. Florida State has much more length and tallest team in the country outside of Duke. So that was encouraging, but those are some key areas where it's been different in addition to the off-ball movement and cutting. There's been a lot more of our wing players like Drake and Seth and Withers and others getting feeds as they're driving to the basket. Another play, real quick, that stood out to me was Ian had the ball on the wing against Florida State, goes into a step back for three. The closeout was good, and he didn't have space to get off the shot comfortably, so he passes it back to the top of the key to Elliott. And instead of what we've done so much this year is, all right, if my shot wasn't there, it's your turn. Now you've got to create and either drive and make it happen by yourself, which with smaller guards, that's difficult in the trees. Instead, Ian cuts immediately to the middle, and Elliott finds him, and he goes right to the rim. So the movement has been better. I think the some of the schematic changes that Hubert has made offensively have been again. I'm a little frustrated because like why haven't we seen some of these things
Hmm.
earlier?
Yeah. Makes sense.
That in addition to playing zone, not that you want to play zone a lot, but mixing it in, mixing in traps. So all these things are really positive. And again, I kind of got rolling there, but there's just so much on my mind with this team. I mean, they're reeling me back in, Craig. Like that's the thing that I'm trying to
I can
resist is
feel
they're
it.
reeling
I
me
can feel
back
it.
in. The hope is there, but I am not believing it yet because I need to see more examples against better
Hmm.
teams before I buy into it.
Yeah, and the only better team you're getting before the ACC tournament is going to be Duke. Virginia Tech and Miami are what they are. We just need to see more of the same. The three-point shooting consistently over 35% would be nice to see. I sent you some numbers earlier today about I was diving into major Google Sheets and data mode when I had some time earlier today and just looking at some of the analytics. When you're talking about three-point shooting, we had 13 threes against Syracuse, 10 against FSU. The only other time we'd been in double digits was SMU, where we shot 11 for 22. The rest of the games, 7, 8, 5, 4, even. These are some really low numbers. And, Roy's famous quote, he always says it, ball looks better when it goes in the basket. And it's so true. And it also is directly correlated to the fact that these guys are playing looser and they're feeling their positions more. It just you'll go out there and play ball. Like when there's less on the line, even though there's more on the line, it's like, well, what do you have to lose? You've gotten yourself in this hole. Just go play the game the way you know how. Get loose, have some fun with it again. And I think that's what you're seeing, and I'm just hoping that it carries over. But I'm right there with you. I'm not fully getting any hopes up. I think this team is still missing a true big man for any kind of real run. We've dug ourselves such a hole that the bubble looks enticing, like the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's unfortunate for what Carolina basketball standards are. And I think if fans definitely are not letting go of that. But we missed in the offseason, and we're dealing with the pieces we got. I think that's what it boils down to. And we're going to transition here shortly into a little bit of Hubert conversation and some of the GM hiring that we mentioned at the very top of the show. But anything else you want to kind of chat about the last four? It's been nice and joyous to talk to the group chat again and talk with you and have some joy in Carolina basketball because it's been a real struggle.
It has been. It's good to see the guys also enjoying it too.
For sure. That's what it's all about.
I mean, it's got to weigh on you, and it does when you're losing like that and the losses pile up mentally, even energy wise, all those things. It gets pretty difficult because it is a grind anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like in terms of the standard, this team lost too many close games where their margin wasn't that big going in, like you said, related to the roster, and they didn't make the winning plays, enough of those winning plays early in the season, as we talked about ad nauseum, and then the conference play. So they are where they are, but at least the eye test shows that they're playing better. The offense looks more fluid. You
Hmm.
see moments of the intensity on defense. The state game where I love seeing Seth Trimble and Drake Powell in a trap together and just multiple possessions in a row where State was really struggling to get the ball up the court and how that feeds our energy, feeds our offense, feeds our transition. So that is pretty exciting to see as well. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, I think I actually think that this team, if they're going to beat one of these teams that they would need to, whether it's Duke or it's ideally like a Clemson or somebody, or Duke again in the ACC tournament. I guess we'll count Louisville as another team that,
Number 19.
yeah, I mean they're really good too. I don't want to
Yeah,
leave them out, but outside of those three, it's pretty ugly within within the
sure.
conference. So anyway, all that to say, you're just not going to have that many chances. Um, but if they're going to beat those teams, then they're going to need to continue this momentum, and so um, they can't really take anything for granted at this point in the season. I guess the last thing I was going to say was you were saying something about guys within roles. Most of these guys have been playing up a position, so the fact that you have now a natural four in Jalen Withers, that takes so much pressure off because Trimble can play more of the. He doesn't have to play four
He
as much,
shouldn't.
right?
He's so small.
He shouldn't. Ian shouldn't. Drake shouldn't. I mean, the thing was, if you're going to go four guards, then you got to use your advantage, which should be in quickness and perimeter shooting. And we weren't using the quickness to get steals. That's not the style that Hubert plays defensively.
And we tried the perimeter shooting, just wasn't there.
And it was not there, right? And so you have no inside presence either. It was just
Hmm.
a mess. So there's much more balance now. And so I don't know that we need an Armando Bacot. I don't know that we need it'd be nice to have him, but we don't need
Sure.
him to have success. If we can continue to do some of the things that we're doing and get that balance and get even small contributions from guys like Kate Tyson, who suddenly is playing with more confidence and can be a little bit physical inside too, in addition to hopefully hitting some perimeter shots, then we have a shot. We have a shot to hopefully uh, at least try to get on and then potentially off the bubble.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the hope is there. It's still a stretch. You still can't have any slip ups. I don't anticipate one against Miami, knock on wood. Hopefully, a week from now, I'm not biting my tongue on this podcast and calling it a season. That'd be an unbearable, terrible loss. So let's just presume that one's going to be a win, especially they're getting absolutely handled by Duke tonight. No surprise. The one at VT, definitely a tough place to play. The Sandman can come out and get you every now and then at VT. And then, of course, when it goes into Duke, I just really want to be competitive. I don't expect to knock them off. The only teams they've really lost to, what, Kansas, Kentucky, and Clemson, I think, this year. So some really, really good talent, and we're just not there. But no slip ups and stay competitive and win a couple games in the ACC. And I think you got a fighting chance to get to the NCAA tournament. And then, you saw 2022. I'm not saying it's 2022 by any means. This is a different team. I think people need to be really clear on that in terms of setting expectations. But if you get in the tournament, that's so nice. That's what March is all about. And then the season isn't a complete loss, and it feels a little better going into the offseason in the portal. So that's kind of all I have to look back on in the last four games. If you have anything else let me know. But I definitely want to chat too tonight while we've got time about the Hubert Davis news that came out today about the extension through 2030. We have some details on that. I know that on the surface and on the headline, it kind of looks like, oh, this news just came out now. If you didn't really dive deep into it, you may have missed that this is very much an off-season conversation before the season started. Deal got actually signed in December, and then some of the news coming out more public today. But yeah, your thoughts on that and the Hubert Davis situation in general. I know we talk a lot of times about instant fan gratification on social media. It's a thing. There's a lot of complications in the landscape around Hubert and around college basketball right now. Just give me your high level thoughts on where you're at with all that because Lord knows it's a hot topic right now.
Well, high level thought number one is even though this season has not been up to the Carolina standard, we've already won 18 games. State only won 17 in the regular season last year, and they, granted, it was a fluke run, but they made it to the Final Four. So I'm not saying that that's where this team is going. I'm just, there's a long way between now and whenever the end of the season
Sure.
happens in terms of how we ultimately judge the entirety of this season and the job that Hubert Davis did. In terms of the contract stuff, I think your point about the context is really important because if you're looking at this and saying, well, this got done the last couple of weeks, why would they extend him?
Sure.
I, I think you have an argument if that is what happened because of the way this season has gone. And now you're really looking at very likely 2 years out of four that Carolina doesn't make the NCAA tournament, which, as Coach K would say, is not acceptable. And really, I mean, there's not a lot of precedent for that at UNC outside of you have to go all the way back to the Doherty era for the last time that happened. So all that to say that that was not the case. I think that's the part that needs to be very clear is the
Hmm.
extension happened over the summer in I think June or July. And then that makes complete sense because at that point he completed 3 years. He'd gone to the national championship game in the first year. Obviously, the second year was what it was. And then the third year, number one seed, win the regular season, ACC Coach of the Year. All of those things that's time for an extension. And so it makes sense that that happened at that point. And then just the way these processes play out, sometimes it can take a while to get signed. And then there wasn't a public statement or anything. So it gets leaked today for whatever reason. So that context is important in terms of what it means going forward. In terms of the details that were released, his buyout is not that substantial that the parties couldn't part ways. And I think there's been rumblings that the landscape and just the way that the position is now have been it's hard to do this job. You see guys like Tony
Hmm.
Bennett, you see other guys leaving the profession, Jay Wright even before that. And so,
Sure.
one possibility is that in the next few years, maybe Hubert decides that it's time for him to do something else and for the program to have somebody else in the lead. Not saying that that's going to happen. So that could be one option, or certainly next year he's on the hot seat. Like you
Right.
can't have a repeat of this. You have to really have a bounce back year. Maybe not a number one seed, but you need to have a year where you're a contender.
It'd be top 25.
Yeah, at least I would say, you've got to look more like a contender. Hopefully closer to top 10, but at
Hmm.
least top 20 throughout the year and be a tournament team next year because otherwise it's time to part ways, in my opinion. Because you can't have an ongoing sort of regression of the program success overall.
Hmm.
So that's another piece of it. The other piece of it that is the news that came out today with the general manager being hired, Jim Tanner, for UNC is, how Hubert is adjusting to this landscape and NIL. And there are still not that many programs that have a GM for basketball. So I think you can make the case like they're not behind in terms of uh, adding this approach to what they do, but it clearly has impacted them not having one, and they could have been more proactive. So,
Hmm.
on the one hand, I would have liked to have seen this happen earlier. On the other hand, I think if I was Hubert and I look and I say, look, last year we were a number one seed, it wasn't an issue for us not having a GM the year before. So things changed a lot, certainly last summer. the landscape's shifting fast. So I appreciate that. Okay, things clearly did not work out, so now I'm making a change. We're going to see what difference this makes, but and we can get into that more, I think. But that piece of it, I think, is going to be interesting and hopefully a step forward, not just under Hubert for as long as he coaches at Carolina, but for the program navigating just the changes are going to continue to happen until there's more consistency, more regulation. So this is a big move by the university and by the program. Um, I think that potentially shifts the trajectory of Hubert Davis's tenure, but also could shift the trajectory of the program as a whole going forward.
For sure. I know he'll get started right away in the offseason, starting to manage some of these deals is, NIL is complicated. And I was even trying to explain it to my dad and my brother over, brunch the other day and realized how complex it is and how much we're all still kind of learning about how many elements make it up. The NCAA side about how things just kind of, genie out of the bottle and when it all happened. And then it's straight chaos. And you've got the SEC pulling it off. They've got football money. Where's the money coming from with donors? There's deals. There's just a lot of complications. And for a head coach to do that while he's also trying to be a head coach for the first time in his career, it's no wonder that things haven't gone quite as smoothly. And that's where I have some grace with Hubert Davis. My one big question, and I kind of want to pick your brain on this, is the fact that Duke has had one for a couple years. We're aware of that. Obviously, I feel like you need to be aware of what your neighbor's doing and how important of a role that is. So maybe hindsight's 2020, we would have hired one earlier, but also the women's program has had one as well before the men. So I kind of wonder, you can speculate all you want. Is Hubert looking for a little more control? Was he against it? We can hot take or guess all we want, but I just find that a little curious that right after the Duke game, it all kind of spiraled out of control at Cameron, and then pretty much a day or two after it was, hey, we're looking for a GM.
Yeah, I mean, clearly things had been building up, and that was a process that was already happening, and so there was almost like damage control at that point, right?
Yep. Yeah, like we
What?
have to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what happened was not, again, not acceptable.
I'll
And
put the soundbite in, don't worry.
yeah, yeah, I miss our guy Kay. It's just not the same seeing him in the front row at Cameron. He found a place to sit. I'm glad that they figured that out for him because he was worried. So
Congratulations.
where will I
Yeah.
sit? Um, and leaving a minute early or whatever. But um, yeah, I think. I mean, I don't remember a direct quote where he said it. It's possible that he did, but he is such a Dean Smith guy and Hubert has such admiration for Dean Smith and the way that he ran the program and his personal experience when he was at UNC that it's kind of the sense that, well, Dean Smith didn't have to have a general manager, so why do I need one? Like wanting to run things in the image of the way Dean ran the program. And again, I may be over interpreting or putting my own sort of thoughts on that or sense on it, but regardless, there wasn't a move to make this happen earlier. To your point, other schools were doing it. It wasn't just Duke. But you do want to keep an eye on in any business what your competitors are doing to be able to,
Especially
you know,
1 8 miles down the road.
100%. And not that you have to do everything that they're doing, right? But like if they're kind of on the leading edge of something, which they were in this case, and it's clearly made a difference for them, that's something you want to consider. And like you said, it's happening in other programs, women's basketball, football, as well. So it does seem like there was reluctance to go that direction initially. And yes, hindsight is 2020, but also if foresight is available, it's important to use foresight and be proactive.
Hmm.
That is one of my I guess one of my critiques of Hubert's tenure is at times he does, to me at least, in my own opinion, appear to be somewhat stubborn in his approach. And while he does make changes and has definitely shown willingness to adapt certain things, at times it takes him a little bit longer than I would like to. Like in this case, if we had this in place a couple of years ago, then maybe you don't have this situation, get it out and ahead of things.
Sure.
Uh, Plus, it just takes so much of the burden off of him, and he doesn't want to talk to agents necessarily, right? He has a lot of
Right.
these things
Right.
that are on his plate now that it gets in the way of him actually being able to spend the time that he needs to coach, which is true of any coach at this level now. So, um, so anyway, Hubert Davis he has forgotten more about basketball than I will ever know, right? Um, so all that to say, like that's just more to my sense of it and kind of where I'm coming from as a fan. But um, I am encouraged that even though maybe it's slower than I would have liked, given what other programs were doing and the success they had with it, he's doing it now. And the best time to do something is always right now.
Right. Yeah. It's nice to see them making moves, and the hire happened what 2 weeks after. I mean, yeah, it went public right after the Duke game about, hey, we're looking for a GM, but we're still in February and we have one. This is not something we're waiting months on or suddenly playing catch up over the summer. This is something that we'll be ready to go in the off season. And so I'm excited for what Tanner's going to bring to the table. It's nice to have a Carolina alum. I don't think this was a, hey, we need to keep it in the family. I do think he seems like the best guy from what I've seen for this job. 1990 graduate, cares about Carolina a lot of NBA experience, managed guys like Vince Carter, Tim Duncan, Grant Hill, I believe too. We'll give him a pass on managing Grant, the Duke grad. But yeah, I'm excited to have him on board, and I think it's important for fans to remember that just because you're allowed to be patient and give Hubert Davis some grace and give it till next year to see what happens with this GM, it doesn't mean you're accepting mediocrity as your standard. I think that's an important point to drive home because people are, again, I sometimes we live on Twitter and Twitter is the worst of fans. A lot of times it's the fans that you talk to in person that are much more level-headed. But point being that you don't need to sit here and either criticize Hubert 100% of the time when there's a loss. You can find the middle ground and say, hey, there's a lot of things in college basketball that are changing, a lot of things he has to learn as a head coach because it's his first time being a head coach. A lot of pressure at Carolina, but he cares about Carolina a lot, and he's going to take some time to learn certain things about in-game coaching, certain things about NIL, about how to recruit. We did get Caleb Wilson, in the last couple weeks as well. Top 10 power forward coming out of high school. So,
But
we're looking to get big again. That's a huge get. But just a reminder that, the instant gratification, yeah, we all like to be a top five seed in the NCAA tournament going into March, but that may not be our reality this year, but give it a chance to reset next year and let's take it kind of one day at a time.
yeah, I think that's a very level approach and way to think about it. I certainly understand if folks have gotten to a point where they would rather move on and that's where they are.
We've had
I
moments.
yeah, I think the frustration's been building. If this had if after Clemson the team had packed it in and spiraled,
Hmm.
there could have been a different conversation potentially. And so
Absolutely.
so now there seems to be a sense of certainty of if nothing else, Hubert's going to be back one more year, and that's the hot seat year and his sort of prove it year, uh, having the resources, the general manager, those types of things. Um, yeah, and we'll see what happens and what he makes of it at that point.
For sure. Yeah, so excited about Tanner. He's had a quote earlier where he mentioned that he's got 28 years of experience recruiting and representing players. So he's definitely excited to be a part of this. Both of his kids went to Carolina. He cares. He's a Tar Heel through and through. So it's super exciting to have him on board. Lots of changes in the Carolina basketball program in the offseason. One of the things I want to wrap up with
I was
now
just
that
going to say, Craig,
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
related to that is that the Carolina family is it's such a mystique, it's such a mentality, and it's such a way of operating at UNC overall. And I think he is uniquely qualified for the position, but he also is a part of the Carolina family. Like I don't think this was a situation where they were going to hire somebody outside of the family.
Hmm.
And that's true of the head coaching position, at least from the sense that's out there right now, that if it's not Hubert, they're looking within the family. And then at
Hmm.
that point, who do you hire? There's not a Roy Williams sitting out there. So
Right.
so that's part of the issue, and that's part of where I would say like I think Hubert has earned another year anyway because he's
Sure.
had yes, you can look at the 2 years where they really have underperformed, but that first year, I look at the metrics from February 15th on, they were the third best team in the country. From March 1st, they were the best team in the country.
Mhm.
That wasn't a fluke. yes, they were mediocre for much of the year, but then they turned it on and doing what they did, they were really impressive in doing that. And again last year. So he's had significant success to the point that if you can get it figured out and find some consistency, and like you said, the way he's recruiting with some of these five stars like Caleb Wilson coming in and what we've seen from Ian Jackson and Drake Powell,
Yeah, they've been
that
great.
puts you in the best situation. The other thing I like about Tanner is the complexities of this world of NIL and the portal and the landscape. There's a lot of legality issues to navigate. So the fact that he has a background as an attorney and an agent for the number of years that he does
Hmm.
really makes a difference. So he understands contract side of things, which is
Yeah,
going to get even more important with the way the direction things where there's going to be hopefully more of a contract approach and
it's got to
more
organize
regulation.
somehow, man. It's just a wild, wild west.
Exactly. And so he understands that world. You know, if Hubert doesn't want to really talk to agents anymore, I don't know that he has to because Jim and his
Hmm.
team, that's his world, right? And so not only does he know a lot of those folks, but he knows how to navigate that world and negotiation aspect of it as well. And then I think from a talent evaluation standpoint, he's that maybe hasn't been as much of his focus from my sense, but you can hire people to do that piece of it, right? But the fact that he can tell folks like he's worked with people in the NBA, so he has a sense of what makes a long lasting NBA career. What are the things to do or not do? Way to guide people, and so that relationship building piece, that trust piece, that I think if you're a parent or uh, prospective student athlete in the room, hearing that gives you a sense of, I think, a sense of trust and a little bit of peace of mind that, okay, not only do I have a Hubert Davis who's this great mentor and really clearly genuinely cares about the the guys that he brings into his program as people, but now I have somebody who can guide me on these other elements of my career in the direction of it. So all of that I think is really encouraging, and for that reason, I think it's a really strong hire because that's a huge need within UNC's program specifically, in addition to some of the other things that they can do in terms of supporting roster construction and roster management.
Yeah, I think that's all really good perspective. I agree with you. It kind of makes sense that you hire from within the family for a position like this. So, yeah, good to have Jim on board. Exciting times for Carolina basketball program. We'll see what the next few weeks hold, but just know that the offseason seems like it's set up for a little more success, a little more time for Hubert to do the job that he was tasked to do. College basketball landscape is just absolutely out of control the last couple of years. A lot of people were also saying, 2022 with, Villanova, Kansas, Duke, UNC, you got four, 3.5 blue bloods. I don't always give Villanova full blue blood status, but, you have 3 to 4 blue bloods in the Final Four for probably the last time in a long while. There's so many competitive players now, and the world's just wide open. So putting a little organization on that and having him on board will be great. One of the bigger changes that's come out to recently is a lot of conversations that have kind of been on pause a little bit around the Dean Dome. You and I were chatting about this a little bit earlier today. Something, gosh, I want to say a little more lighthearted, but people are taking this one really seriously at times too. And it's a big decision because the Dean Dome, around since the mid '80s, post Jordan, post Worthy. Let's make that point clear real quick. They never played there. They played at Carmichael. You and I just chatting about this earlier. The options for this site have been a little bit all over the place. They've talked about the Friday Center. They've talked about Carolina North. They've talked about the Skipper Bowles lot right by the Dean Dome where it is now. Building one kind of adjacent. They've talked about renovations, but there's a lot of issues with trying to make the concourse bigger in that space. So there's just a lot of complications around it. But the most recent article that came out was talking about not fully confirmed by any means, but that the direction they're leaning is toward the Carolina North lot, the old Horace Williams Airport, which, Jonathan, as you know, would be walking distance from my parents' house and where we grew up in Chapel Hill. So tailgates at their spot, 6 years from now potentially. But what are your thoughts on campus versus off campus tradition, how we kind of approach that? There's the whole brand side about needing to make that money for NIL, selling suites, selling alcohol, which they do now, but there's a lot more money to be made. Kind of, you think of what Kentucky did with Rupp Arena and a full renovation. You think about what Louisville was really at the forefront of it, doing the KFC Yum Center years and years ago. There's a lot of options here, but what are your initial thoughts on the Dean Dome 2.0 or renovations?
Well, I think if they go with the option that is near your parents' house, that bodes well for pregame pizza making. So
100%.
I would vote for that just based on that piece of it.
Yeah, they'll be down.
Because I haven't had a homemade marinara sauce from y'all
Dude, you know how they
in
do.
a while. That family recipe is serious. Um, so, I mean, I think in an ideal world for me, if logistically there was a way to make renovation of the Smith Center work, then that feels like a no-brainer because you already have the spot on campus. There is such a tie to at UNC especially. There's something special about having Keenan right in the heart of campus, right? Having the
Mhm.
Smith Center, it's iconic by itself as a building and a venue, and then the history that's happened obviously within the Smith Center. But the other piece is you literally see it just looming up there on the hill. And
Yeah.
there's something iconic about that as you make that descent and um, past Manning and all of that and start to walk up the hill to the Smith Center. It just is an iconic feel that way. So ideally, you would be able to renovate it, but it doesn't really seem that like that's very feasible
Yeah, it's
because
very limited in space.
yeah, I mean, what you're talking about, what they're needing, like the suites and pieces like that, and extending the concourse because it is so congested.
It's rough.
It's
Yeah.
it's not a great experience in terms of the concourse, for sure. So for them to really modernize it, that makes it really difficult. You're almost from reading some of those articles, you're almost talking about having to do a complete rebuild or even just tear it down and start over.
Hmm.
And either option, you're limited in space up there. I can't remember exactly. Greg Barnes did an awesome, I think it's his next level podcast on Inside Carolina. If you go through the Inside Carolina feed, it should be easy enough to find. But he talks about some of the different when they came out with here are the location options that we're researching. There are issues with the foundation, and there's only so much you can do because of I think the rock out there where the Smith Center is
Yeah,
that you
they
can't,
did
can't
rebuild.
really expand it or move it.
Right.
So you're either talking about more like feasible would be to move it to the Bowls lot. So you're still in the same area, but there's issues with that as well. So all that to say that like ideally I would keep it where it is and modernize it, add the suites that you want.
Sure.
Um, if you can tear it down, not maybe not tear it down, but if by remodeling it, you can also say we no longer have a lifetime seating policy for Rams Club members, and you get the students down at the court, around the
Yeah.
court. That's great
Great.
too.
Yeah.
But as
Just like
long
the
as
NC
they're
State game, snow game. You had students packed
right,
in and the crowd made a difference.
the snow games are awesome, and you're only going to get that for those types of scenarios as long as it's at the Smith Center. So that wouldn't be the number one reason for me
Sure.
moving it. It's logistically, there's not feasible ways to modernize it. Here's the other thing, like you said, Michael Jordan didn't play there, James Worthy didn't play there. Carmichael was an iconic venue in its own right, and so we've been through this before. While it's not ideal, that history doesn't just go away. You carry that with
Mhm.
you, and ultimately the history of the program is about winning. If you win
100%.
basketball games, then whether you play on a boat like we did in San Diego against Michigan State, back in 2011 or wherever, does it, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I don't want to give that impression because I know
I
especially
get you though.
for alumni and Theo Pinson and Raymond Felton and Justin Jackson talked about this, like
Hmm.
you should never move it. But from a feasibility standpoint, if you can't renovate it the way you need to compete and keep up, then it does seem like the best option is the Carolina North satellite campus. And that is going to be a satellite campus. So it's not on the main campus, but it's right in town, like you're saying. It's not very far away. And I like, did my master's at Wake Forest and Wake plays at Orange Joel Coliseum. It's not right on campus. It's a brief shuttle ride over there. It
Hmm.
was really a non-issue. It was maybe like
Yep.
a 5-10 minute ride. Very easy to get on the shuttle. So
Yep.
if they can figure out the traffic issues and congestion, which I think would be one of the big issues
Right.
over there, if they can get the logistics to work, I think it makes sense. And then you're also talking about you have to have corporate sponsorship at some
Hmm.
point. You have
Yeah,
to,
it'll happen.
from a pure dollar standpoint, you have to have that as the lead name on the building. And I think you brought up a good point that in an ideal world, that would be Jordan Brand, right?
Air Jordan Arena.
I mean, it just makes sense. And then who loves Dean Smith more than Michael Jordan, right? He's on that short list of people.
Hmm.
So there's ways to honor Dean Smith. There's ways to honor Roy Williams in that
Yep.
new arena. There's ways to make that happen. Again, I'm not saying that's ideal, but it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like the ideal situation of renovating the Smith Center is feasible. So
Yep.
therefore, I would say best option then is look at Carolina North.
Yeah.
Um, and people will adjust. I mean, it'll be a different
Right.
experience,
That's
but
exactly it.
it'll still be Carolina basketball. It'll just be a new building and a new experience as we move into the next era of what Carolina basketball is.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of been my thoughts on it too. If I've been coming to, the mentality that the Dean Dome may not be able to be renovated in that space, and having, accepted that, then I moved toward Carolina North being a pretty good option in terms of, there are some students who live up that way. You figure out, a rapid transit bus line that's already in the works with Chapel Hill Transit from, basically I-40 all the way down, south of campus towards Southern Village. Then you have some public transit options as well for students to get there. I'm sure they'll figure out the logistics, but I don't hate the idea of bringing some of these businesses in a district and having a place to go pregame, ahead of time, go eat dinner. If you're not eating pizza at my parents' house, adjacent, going out ahead of time and being able to go out right afterward. Um,
And I think
I
they
do think
imagine.
people,
So I was just going to say, Lee Roberts, the chancellor of the university, he's a real estate guy, he's a business
yep,
guy, and so he's kind of envisioning this district area, right,
yeah,
of
you have space for
restaurants
it.
and bars that's right there next to the arena. It sounds a lot like some of these modern venues, like the Atlanta Braves stadium that you and I, when it opened,
Yep,
went to. Uh, it's a pretty cool setup. I mean,
yep.
it's different, but you have so many things right there. Uh, my question is, will Ti be there? If they create something like this, will Ti be performing in the middle of that space, just a
Classic,
random
yeah.
concert?
Classic. That did happen to Jonathan and I when we visited Atlanta, the opening weekend of SunTrust Park. We heard T.I. on what we thought was the radio at the time and realized it was live and went over and, had a blast that weekend
It was like
at the
100 feet
Braves. It was
away from
great.
us.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. Fantastic. Yeah, they'll have some kind of opening concert for sure. No doubt. There's a lot of 360,000 plus Carolina alumni. So you can get somebody to come in.
And App State alumni like Eric Church. I think he would be
Yeah, we
ready
don't we don't
to
talk about
go.
that. Yeah. Where's John? We can get him on the podcast,
Right.
right? Yeah, no, 100%. I think there's just a lot of good options. And you see it at Lenovo Center too. Granted, the Carolina Hurricanes are an aspect of that in terms of a professional hockey team sharing an arena, right? So that makes a huge difference. But they've got 5, 10 year plans to build that whole place up starting next year. It's already been approved by the city of Raleigh. They're putting in suites outside, tailgate areas, all of that. And Carolina North has the space to do that too. So I'm kind of excited for what, if I'm just going to be one to say, hey, look, change happens. Carmichael changed to the Dean Dome. Dean Dome has to ultimately change to something else. This is a pretty good option. And I think as it starts to come to fruition, if they figure out the logistics of it, students will show up. All right. If they get a ticket to the game, that's not like they're not going to figure out a way to the game. It changes the idea of rushing Franklin a little bit for the students who are at the game. It
Right.
doesn't change it for the students who are on campus. Franklin Street will still be there.
Right.
I still think people go out on Franklin Street to eat at those restaurants. It's just an added bonus of something else positive. When you and I were talking, I was getting all hyped on Air Jordan or Nike Arena. When you walk in, seeing a huge blow up image of Michael Jordan kissing Dean on the forehead, tell the story of the Carolina basketball around the concourse and have an
Right.
elite experience where I don't have to wait 10 minutes in line at a bathroom during halftime and rush back to my seat or be cramped next to people. And it's not modernized and it may not be able to be modernized, I think is the biggest thing. So we don't have to dive too deep into it. I know a lot of people have different opinions, but I think just embrace it. And like you said, the culture is about winning. Carolina basketball is winning. I don't care if it's on the pickup courts during the summer, you want to play there, fine, or if it's at a new arena. Either way.
Look, if we didn't ever change, we'd still be playing at the Tin Can, which was the first Carolina basketball
Right.
venue before even Woolen Gym, right? And
Yeah.
So yeah, it's part of it is in order to address the needs and compete. I think it's probably going to have to happen. You're right. There are ways to tell that story in a new way and have. I mean, when you and I went to the Allen Fieldhouse and they have the museum as part of Allen Fieldhouse, and the Carolina Basketball Museum is awesome.
Hmm.
It's really cool. It's next door though, so you have to walk. It's not far, but it's
Yeah, yeah,
not part of it, and you could have it be part of it. And then the cool thing is when we blow out NC State the next time, we're up by 25. Wolfpack fans, as they're leaving at the end of the first half, they can also learn more about our history too. So there's a lot. I think
perfect.
it's a
Yeah,
it's a win-win for everybody, even opposing
yeah.
fans.
Maybe just have a Bojangles tracker and how many times each team has won us Bojangles, 100 points and free biscuits. Keep a live electronic tracker there.
We beat them more than anybody else. I'd
We
like
almost got it last time, 97.
I'd like to think that we've gotten biscuits on them, yeah, more than anybody else. Yeah, 97 was close, but and nothing. I mean, so we're wrapping up. Nothing is more gratifying than beating the absolute living daylights out of NC State. That was a very satisfying win.
That was great. Yeah, players took a lot of pride in it too. You saw Seth's look at Trez. That's all you need to know.
Right.
Just the stare down. It's like, dang, I didn't realize Seth had that in him. Got a little hate.
And that's actually the key to the rest of this. Bring more of that energy, right? Bring more of that
100%.
dog that he has in him. Um, yeah, that was an awesome moment.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So, yeah, I think we've covered everything basketball related. I do want to give you, per your request earlier when we were chatting, a little moment to talk about all things Carolina in sports. We're going to talk about baseball a little bit to wrap up with the Diamond Heels because they're off to an incredibly hot start. We do have a side hustle, so to speak, the Bosch Brothers Twitter account that we have that you manage. Seems to be, I guess they play games almost every day. That's the thing about baseball is they're always there's always a game happening. But I want to let you have the floor real quick. 8-0 to start. Started out with big, win over Texas Tech, 3 games to start the year. I believe it was K-State in between, and then a
Was
sweep of ECU, and it's been a while since we've swept them, so that's always nice.
Yeah, actually, we since they started doing this traveling series, weekend series, we have never swept ECU.
Like I said, it's
So
been a while.
yeah, it was a big deal. Kansas State made the Super Regionals last year, so they were a strong team last year. Brought back a lot of talent. Started off pretty rough, including losing to
Hmm.
us. They were 1-4, but now they beat number 5 Arkansas. They beat TCU, who's a top 25 team. They look a lot better, so that win's going to carry. But like you said, for first time we've been 8-0 since 2019. The
Yeah,
pitching staff is
seems
unbelievably
sensational. Yeah,
deep. It's a lot of fun personalities in the pitching
good.
staff too.
Well, I knew
Walker Mc,
that from the intro songs when they did that video about what's your walk-up song going to be, and you have guys picking AC/DC and some really random ones that are great.
there's a lot of classic rock in there.
Yeah,
Ram Kellis the fifth, Ram Kellis the fifth, a transfer in left fielder. His walk-up song is Rolex on a Redneck, which he said pretty much sums up his personality. I don't
solid.
actually really know what that means, but I like that for him, and I like that for he clearly has a lot of personality. Walker McDuffie is this electric freshman reliever, right-handed pitcher, a lot of swagger, has the glasses on. He's got a little bit of like Wild Thing sort of energy about him from Major League with the Charlie Sheen, Rick Vaughn character. And even he had hit one of the VCU hitters today in the helmet early in his appearance. Thankfully, they were okay, but like that was I can't imagine standing in after that. And after that happened, he strikes out 7 guys in 3 innings, so including striking out the side twice. All that to say that the pitching staff is electric from the starters, the ace with Jason DeCaro on down, and then Hunter Stokely is somebody who's been in the program for a while now. It's his last year, and he is on fire. He looks to not just provide leadership from that emotional standpoint, but being one of the best hitters on the team. Related to Chad Flack, Carolina legend, bringing us to Omaha all the way back in, I think that was 2006 before we started that run. I just went on a whole new podcast. I didn't mean to do that, but I do
It's
love
only a matter of
Carolina
time before you start
baseball.
it. So
And yeah, I guess I would say that if you have time or you just want something on in the background on TV, if you can't make it to the stadium while you're doing laundry or other things, I have the game on while I'm cooking a lot. And A, it's just relaxing to have baseball and the sounds of baseball in the background. But B, this team is fun to watch. Don't wait until May
Nice.
or June to lock into Carolina baseball. They're doing great things right now, and there's some great moments and great players. So all that to say, check it out now. And like you said, Bosch Brothers is our Twitter account, and we're pretty active on that. Maybe not every game, but a lot of games we'll try to get on there. So if you like baseball and you like emojis, that's what the Bosch Brothers is all about. We have an emoji for as many
Perfect.
players as we can to when they get a strikeout or hit a home run or something happens, we have an emoji for like Rom Kellis, a watch for his Rolex on a redneck. Kane Kepley, his walk-up song is Circle of Life, so we got a lion for him.
Beautiful.
Um, yeah, we
That's
have fun with
dedication,
it.
folks. Look how much
It's,
effort this man's putting in every day.
it's probably a little bit too much, but I do have fun with it.
That's all that matters at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean, hey, a team that's 8-0 is a lot of fun to cheer for. So,
Yeah.
good on you. I will try to make it over to a game shortly in my schedule. It is always nice to get to the Bosch. A long time ago, we went to one of my favorite games ever, Bark at the Bosch, where we brought Lana and Splash, our two pups who were, what, like 3 and 5 at the time or
Mhm.
something, just babies. Yeah, a lot of fun. So yeah, if you get over to the Bosch, check it out, support the Diamond Heels. Really good stuff going on there. The basketball program here up, on the upswing, 4 games in a row, 3 to go. Big one at Duke to close out the year. Let's hope to get 2 more wins coming up. And then do want to close the show with a quick point out. Just want to point out to Jim Tanner coming back to Carolina. Um, Conversation's been happening for a while now, but just a proud alum. But like you said, both of his kids went there. He very much is a Tar Heel through and through. So excited to have him on board, to see what he and Hubert kind of team up to do. It seems like this is going to be a really good fit. Let's see what the rest of this season holds, and give Hubert some grace. I will say, let's see what happens in the next month. Reserve your judgment. Keep your hopes high. Keep going where you go and doing what you do. You never know what March can bring. And we'll kind of take it from there. Any other closing thoughts, Jonathan? It's good to be on with you tonight.
It's great. I was just going to say, I mean, it's not all on Hubert like we talked about. It's on the players have to, he can't make
100%.
shots for him, right? He can't
Right.
execute the plays for them. So
Back in the
it's a,
day, he could.
that's right. Yeah, when he was putting up like 35 at
Right.
Cameron and just on fire from outside. Um, but it's a combination of responsibility of getting to where they want to be. And I want to point out to Jalen Withers as one of those guys who,
Love it.
like we talked about, whatever it takes, he's embracing that and he's taking that responsibility. And this is somebody who's had an up and down basketball career. Couldn't have been easy at Louisville when they were struggled as much as they did, and to be part of that, but to keep going, find a spot at Carolina, have a tough season, start last year, but turn the corner about this time of year, really started to catch on. That game against Louisville they had with a double-double, I think, and then the Wagner game in the tournament. He had a good game at Duke
Hmm.
too. He's kind of doing the same thing this year, and even
Yeah.
at a next level, right? I mean, the one thing I didn't mention about him that I just started laughing was one of the threes against Virginia. He got an offensive rebound, and when you're playing half-court basketball, the ball hits the rim, you got to take it back behind the three-point line before you can operate on offense. He kind of did that. He got the rebound, goes to the three-point line, and just immediately turns around. That's such a half-court basketball move to catch the defense by surprise and just let it rip, and nails it. And so he's
Playing
been
street
fun to
ball.
watch. So I hope he keeps it going. But I'm happy for him too because these guys work incredibly hard, and
For
he's from
sure.
North Carolina. This means a lot to him, and I hope he is able to end his career on a really high note.
I think there's a part of him that wants to make a little deeper run than Louisville too.
Yeah, I mean that would be pretty sweet. Hey, maybe if we even play them again at some point, that would be sweet to exact some revenge from what happened at the Yum Center early in January.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, high hopes for the team. Like I said, lock in. Let's cheer them on through the end of the season. See where it gets us, and then we'll head into the off season after that, and repeat the whole thing. And you never know what the transfer portal can bring nowadays. So, we'll have Jim on board. We'll have Hubert, developing as head coach, and yeah, good time to be a Carolina basketball fan right now.
It is Jim and a whole staff. He's going to have
Yep.
Buzz Peterson involved in some way. They're really Matt Norlander with CBS reporting that it's going to be like a college front office. So this is the next era, really, I would say, of what Carolina basketball can be.
Yep. It's always good to be a fan and, take the 4-game win streak and ride it, and we'll see where we go. So until next time, we appreciate you being here with us, and go Heels.
Go Heels.